Hello, I'm Grin, and welcome back to the endless struggle that is my life, also known as Washer Dryer's Adventures in Rusty Bucket Bay Part 2. If you missed the previous episode, well, you didn't really miss a great deal, because since I died at the end of it, almost all of my achievements throughout the runtime were immediately erased. I did, however, manage to get one Jiggy, so I guess that's something, or at the very least, better than nothing. And I've got to say, I'm really starting to get a Groundhog Day vibe here, because it's just entirely infuriating. It's not about just redoing the engine room, it's all of the build-up that goes before it. I mean, before you can even go down to the engine room, you first have to run all the way to this end of the ship and slow down the fans, otherwise when you get to the engine room, well, you're not going to be able to do anything about it. The first time you ever encounter this, and I mean the first time as in the first time you're ever playing the game, it's a cool little piece of puzzle solving, especially considering that the two rooms share a window, so when you're in the engine room trying to figure out how to get past the fan, you can see the clearly marked switch, and when you're in the switch room you can see the engine room, so you know what to actually look for. So yeah, definitely a cool thing for the first playthrough. However, when you know what you're supposed to be doing already, it's just an extra step, and it's kind of annoying. And when it's your third attempt in one sitting, well, it really starts to make your blood boil. And while I would get all philosophical and claim that the road to success is paved by failure, but on the other hand, I messed up that jump down the chimney the last time I did it, so maybe I'm not really learning that much. I'm not going to let that get to me, however. After all, Anakin Skywalker himself was a slow learner, and he ended up becoming one of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy. Granted, shortly afterwards he lost the plot somewhat and went on a bit of a killing spree, which some might argue was somewhat unprofessional of him, but on the other hand, that was prophesized, and if you can't escape your destiny, can you really be blamed for your actions? The answer is yes, of course you can, or at least I hope you can. Otherwise, in a deterministic universe, of which I believe this one to be, well, it would make no sense to punish anyone for their crimes or celebrate anyone's successes. And if that were the case, then succeeding in the Washer Dryer challenge would really deserve no congratulations, as it's not so much the product of my success, but instead the necessary outcome forced by billions of actions and reactions dating back to the Big Bang. However, I am forced, perhaps literally, to ask myself through introspection, what exactly would this change? If indeed all of our actions and thoughts are predetermined by the state of the universe directly prior to the moment of the present, then would I still be doing the Washer Dryer challenge, despite the fact that a victory in the challenge is no more my success than a light bulb's illumination, a choice by the bulb itself following the flick of a switch? And the answer to that is rather simple. Yes, of course I would be. It's predetermined so. But let's try to get back on track, because not a moment ago I claimed I wasn't going to get too philosophical, and yet here I am not a moment later rabbiting on about the ramifications of determinism. And so, putting aside my rather wide digression, let's return back to the subject at hand, namely the engine room of Rusty Bucket Bay, where we are now about to the point that last time I failed, which is always a bit of a mixed blessing because it both proves that getting here last time wasn't a fluke, but on the other hand, when you've failed doing your best, the only way to improve upon that failure is to do even better than your absolute best. Which I of course did, easily, because I am great, and you should have never doubted my success. I certainly didn't, and I wasn't at all panicking at any moment. And to celebrate this newfound confidence, I, as you've seen, did a ground pound on the fan switch, which slows down the turbines at the back of the boat, the Rusty Bucket one. Now pay careful attention here, because this is where things get a little bit weird. As you can see, I did a ground pound, the little cutscene played, the engine slowed, and in the bottom left of the screen, we now have a countdown until the engine speeds up again. Now, you might notice that at this moment, I'm not actually going anywhere. This is simply because I wasn't really paying too close attention when I did the ground pounding, and was looking around when the counter started, and didn't really want to waste much of my time. I had remembered from the last time I played through this game, not as a washer dryer mind you, that this is a pretty tight time trial and there's not a lot of time to spare. And so rather than rushing all the way to the turbines after wasting the first few seconds and having to do the entire engine room again, I figured it would be far safer to just wait out the clock and then slam down the switch again once it flicks up. That way I'll have the full time at my disposal. And besides, it's not like there's absolutely nothing to do during this countdown. I took the spare time to snap a pose for the thumbnail of the video. But with the timer clicking down to 0 and Gruntilda gloating at me, the switch flicks up and I give it another ground pound, which is where things get a bit interesting. You see, as it should, it played the cutscene showing the engine slowing down, though strangely, it didn't give me another timer. Which somewhat leaves me in this awkward position, wondering what I'm supposed to do. I don't really want to just wait around for another whole minute, which is what I would have to do, because the switch is already down, and so I can't ground pound it again. And that's assuming that the switch is even going to come up again after a minute. I am not sure it will, as after all there's no timer, and if the switch itself is attached to the timer and the timer's not there, then who's to say that it's even going to come back? And if indeed it's not going to come back and the switch is down and as the cutscene has shown us, the turbines have slowed, then what am I worrying about anyway? By all rights, the Jiggy is there for the taking, I just have to swim down and claim it, and I shouldn't be in any hurry to do so as, after all, there's no timer. But in truth, this isn't really a sentiment I believe. I think it's probably still ticking down just as it would with a timer, and I've just accidentally glitched out the game by ground pounding the switch before the timer plays to show the turbine starting up again. But at this point, curiosity has taken its toll. While I don't think it's going to actually work, I've never heard of this happening before, and I myself have definitely never encountered it. And considering that I, like a fool, ran off the wrong side of the boat, well, even if there were a timer, the chances of me getting to the Jiggy within the time limit became pretty damn minute at the very instant that I lemminged myself off the wrong side of the cliff. But I figure in for a penny, in for a pound, I've already come this far, so I might as well continue on and see if I can get the Jiggy regardless. But before I dive headlong into danger, an interesting thing to note is that the washer dryer's air bubbles continue to go down while in the poison water as they do if you're Banjo and Kazooie. I had half expected this not to be the case, considering that the washer dryer doesn't take damage from the hot sand or the cold water or even the swamplands. But I suppose swimming, and in extension the oxygen meter, is a different state than taking damage regularly, so I suppose it sort of makes sense. But let's now move swiftly past that interesting observation because we're now dawning on the moment of truth. And as we look down upon the turbine and the Jiggy within, and indeed our destiny, I can't help but think, ugh, those still look like they're moving pretty darn fast. And while swimming into fast-moving blades on the offset sounds like a bad idea, okay, never mind, it turns out that it was indeed just a bad idea. I had gone into that decision with the logic that if they were spinning too fast, then to slow them down, I would have had to do the engine room again anyway, so it didn't really matter if I had died. Though, on the other hand, I'm now reflecting that that really doesn't make a great deal of sense, as I had already gotten all of the music notes in the engine room, and could have just left this Jiggy to last. And so, while I do, in retrospect, admit that swimming headlong into fast-moving turbines wasn't really the smartest move, I do wash my hands with the mistake, because I must point out that it wasn't really my fault, as I was predetermined to do so.